This is Jeff Davis with the Alignment Podcast, where we explore sales and marketing alignment strategy for B2B businesses. Make sure to visit jeffdavis2.com for all things alignment. Now let's talk about how to create togetherness.
Today's guest is Gary Smith, Chief Executive at the Gary Smith Partnership. It is a sales and marketing consulting firm that specializes in process change and enabling disruptive technology implementation. In our conversation, we discuss the most compelling reason why sales and marketing must align right now, how to build the business case for alignment to get support from the CEO, the 5 things you must do to start on the path to alignment, and culture's impact on successfully being able to achieve alignment. With that said, let's jump into the episode. Gary, thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
You're welcome, Jeff. Looking forward to it. It's an exciting thing you're doing here with this podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a passion of mine, and I really want to help our sales and marketing leaders as well as CEOs out here to try to figure this out from a strategic standpoint. So let's start with, tell us who Gary Smith is and why you came to this point of sales and marketing alignment being a focus for you.
Well, my name is Gary Smith. I'm the co-founder and chief executive of a company called the Gary Smith Partnership, and we help companies in what would now be called sales enablement, but in old money would be called people, process, and technology. And we found this whole question of how do sales and marketing get better aligned? How do they make 2 and 2 equal 5? How do they collaborate? How do they produce a synergistic relationship? And it's something that more and more of our customers are talking to us about, and it's taking more of prominence in the press. And your podcast is an example, Jeff. So it's becoming increasingly prominent in conversation and so on. So we've done a lot of thinking about it. We've done a lot of practical work with customers and to help them better align and produce better revenue results. So it's a topic of interest and it's a topic of importance to us.
So it sounds like from what you've shared with us, you've been working on this type of work for quite some time. So you have a body of work to speak from. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. It's something that we really evolved into. We were traditionally a CRM technology implementer, but to really get the best of any CRM technology and increasingly marketing automation technologies, you absolutely have to address the process, you have to address the people, you have to look at culture and so on. And businesses, executives demand results from their investments. And that's really where the whole question of how do you align sales and marketing comes from.
Thank you. So I had a chance to read Align to Achieve by Tracy Eiler and Andrea Austin. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but they really have put a business book together that specifically talks about sales and marketing alignment. And one thing I thought was interesting from the book, there were many, but they came up with this mantra called sales can't do it alone, and marketing exists to make sales easier. I want to help frame the conversation of why now, why today is sales and marketing alignment so important for B2B CEOs and executives to really pay attention to? What has happened in the market?
Well, I think what has changed over the last few years is really the buying process, the journey that buyers go on. There's that well-known statistic, or often quoted statistic from the CEB, that buyers are 57% of their way through the buying process before they engage with a salesperson. Now, if B2B organizations are still attempting to influence the buyers through that 57%, they're still trying to get engaged with buyers, they're still trying to make those buyers favorably disposed towards their solution or their set of solutions. So if it's not the salesperson doing that communication, who is it? And it's really marketing doing that communication. So I think that B2B selling organizations have found it increasingly difficult to get salespeople in front of buyers. And the buyers have often they're so far down the journey when the salesperson does get involved that it's an imperative for those selling organizations to get involved in the process earlier. And how do they do that? They do that through marketing communications. And I think it's that recognition that has really led to this topic taking on the prominence it has at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think a lot of companies are starting to feel that, but I don't know if everybody in leadership understands really how to approach that, especially the fact that I found through talking with folks like you and doing research and having interactions that the CEO really needs to be on board in order to really make this work. So how do we start to build the business case so that we can say, dedicating resources toward this type of effort is worth it? How does the VP of sales and the CMO go to the CEO? How do we start that conversation?
Well, I found there's really two things you have to do. The first is you have to produce some sort of quantified business case. And there are various frameworks you can use to do that. We help companies identify the benefits, the business capabilities that they need to produce to deliver those benefits, and the things that they have to produce, the deliverables, the things they have to change in order to achieve the business capabilities. And there are ways that you can quantify those benefits. So that's one side of it. But I think you also have to go with a story, or you have to go with an anecdote. To give you an example,
Okay.
I was talking to a prospect of one of our customers the other day, and they had failed to win a deal, and the prospect had told our client that they were too expensive. That was the reason that they didn't go with them. And I asked the prospect if this was true, and he said, "Well, that's what we told them." He said, "That's what we told them, that you were too expensive." He said, "The reality was that if we had really wanted to work with them, we could have gotten around that somehow." He said, "But the truth is, we didn't want to work with them. Actually, the salesperson was obnoxious." He said, "Every time we asked a question, he interrupted me. They were too quick to submit their proposal. They didn't teach us anything. They didn't give us any insight. They were just too keen to drive the sale along." That company, our client, had spent the last 6 months tinkering around with their pricing strategy to no avail. Now, when I took that anecdote, that story to the board, they were shell-shocked. There was a kind of deafening silence. Now, when we do that research, and I think when anybody does that research, you have to do it anonymously in the sense that you don't tell the client who said what about whom. You just report the general sense. But the buyer had said it was just easy to tell them that they were too expensive. He said nobody got fired. We didn't have an argument. It was just a graceful way to bring the whole thing to a deal. But when you take that to the board, they think, hang on a minute, maybe we do need to change. Maybe we do need to produce content that gives insight to people. Maybe we do need to change the way our sales process works. In their organization, the board had just given them they got increasingly focused on sales pipeline velocity. They had, driven the salespeople along, and that had produced that type of behavior. So you have to go, to answer your question, I think you have to go with a quantified business case, but I think you have to go with that sort of qualitative element as well. You have to go with those stories, those kind of real life anecdotes.
And I like the fact that you say you have to go with this two-part approach, right? It's one thing to come with a quantifiable business case, which I think obviously for any CEO is extremely important, but there may be a miss, like you said, if you don't bring in those stories of missed opportunities or things that we can do better. So I'm glad you brought that up, because some people may miss that second part that's important.
And I think the way you get those stories, Jeff, is you have to, and you have to go to, if I can put it this way, you have to go to the horse's mouth. You have to go to the customers and the prospects and find out what is important to them. What I see happening time and time again is that companies say, right, we are going to align sales and marketing. So the first thing they do is they get a bunch of salespeople and the marketing team in a room together. And the marketing guys say to the salespeople, okay, tell us what the customers really want. Well, the salespeople don't know what the customers really want, as that anecdote kind of reveals. So you have to break that mold. You have to go outside. You have to break that blame game. And you have to go and find out what is truly important to the customer. And I think that's so important.
So you make me think of something really interesting, right? So we get sales together, we get marketing together, but there are those opportunities that we not only talk to our current customers, but we talk to customers that we might have lost business from to learn the real reason why.
Well, you learn I guess like most things in life, you learn so much more from failure than you do from success.
Yeah.
There's a very good book by Matthew Syed. It's called Black Box Thinking, and it's about how you learn from failure. And the reason you have to go and get that research, the reason you have to go and get that qualitative information from customers is you have to break that kind of mold of sales and marketing blaming each other. Now, nobody can argue that the customer said such and such. Either they said, the content isn't good enough, or they said the proposal focuses too much on the seller and not on the buyer, or whatever it might be. You have to go and get that information, and then you have to learn from failure. You learn so much more from failure, and you have to look at each of the points in the buying process and each of the points in your selling process and say, which one of those could we have done 1% better, 2% better? And what are the things that we didn't do that buyers say we should do? And you have to treat those things not to accentuate the kind of blame process. You have to treat them as an opportunity. You have to treat them as a marginal gain in disguise. So every flaw, every error, you have to say, actually, we could tweak that, make that a bit better.
So I want to move us a little further and do a little bit of a deep dive into, once we hit go, where do we go? So we've talked to the CEO, we've made that business case, and we've also given that compelling story of why. And everybody's on board, right? We have the VP of sales, we have the CMO on board. As a team, how do we start on this journey? Because what I hear from a lot of people is there's all these B2B solutions and technologies. I don't know where to start. In your mind, what are those first steps to start moving the organization forward to alignment?
Well, I don't think you start with technology. I don't think you start with a solution.
I would agree.
I think there are 5 things you have to do. The first is you have to go and find out what is truly important. You have to get that qualitative feedback from customers and prospects. The second thing you have to do is you have to implement a robust closed feedback loop from sales to marketing. And what I mean by that is every lead that is transferred from marketing to sales, you have to get quantitative information on the output, on what happened, and you have to get qualitative information from sales as well. So, for example, if people are using a CRM system such as Salesforce.com or whatever it is, you have to get a robust process in place, and you have to use the facilities that are in CRM systems such as Chatter in Salesforce to get qualitative feedback from sales as well. And it's really only when you start to do that, the third thing you do is you get people in a room, sales and marketing in a room together. And you say, right, let's take a deal that we lost. And we will go from the very beginning of that process and let's look at everything we did. What are the things that we could have done better? What are the things that we could have done a little bit differently? And this time you managed to break through that, well, it's sales' fault or it's marketing's fault, because you've got that feedback. You've got that external, you've got that qualitative feedback, and you've got some metrics about what actually happened. And you use that then to start analyzing the process. You look at a process, you look at this deal you lost, you look at a deal you won, you go through 5 or 6 different deals, and you start to say, how do we change? What are the things that we need to do? And I think the fourth and fifth thing you do is you look for all of those marginal gains. You look for all of those things we could do. If you could do lots of things 1% better, that will add up to a significant improvement in your effectiveness in the overall process. So you look for those, you look to see how you aggregate those marginal gains. And I think the fifth thing you do, and you only do this sometimes, is you make a step change in the way that you work. And that step change might be a new piece of technology. It might be a marketing automation system. It might be a new CRM system. It might be something else. It might be a cultural change. It might be a change to your sales process. But those are the things that you do occasionally. What you do every day is you rigorously implement a process of marginal gains to make small incremental improvements that add up to a big gain over a period of time.
And speaking about that step change, and you mentioned the culture, let's talk a little bit about that, because I do think that culture has a huge impact on alignment efforts. What are your thoughts about that? And then who owns changing that culture if it needs to be changed?
Well, I think often it does need to change. There's book, but there's a very good book I read by Carol Aronson and a co-author, and the book's called "Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me." And I think that sort of attitude pervades a lot of conversation between sales and marketing. I mean, how often have you heard salespeople complain that the leads we get from marketing are rubbish, and marketing say, "Well, you never phone the damn leads we do give you." So it's you have to get over that. So I think you have to break that culture, and yes, I do think that external information, that external feedback, because if it's the customers saying it, it's kind of hard to argue. So you have to instill that change, and I think it's something I think it's something that is difficult to say a one person owns it. I think that there are mobilizers that you can use in the organization very often to drive a cultural change. It's obviously something that we help and we advise companies, and we try to motivate them to make that change. But ultimately, it's something the business has to want to do, and that want either comes from, sometimes it comes from declining market share, sometimes it comes from a static pipeline, sometimes it comes from some pressure, some city pressure to grow revenue, wherever it comes from. There's got to be something that compels people to want to change and to want to look outside their existing paradigm in order to make that change.
So it sounds like then the leadership need to rally around a vision of the need for change, and that will ultimately start to pull people's hearts and minds into buying into this process of working together better for the survival of the business or whatever that vision is for the company.
Yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. I think that these sort of programs, I guess you could say about any compelling change in business, people have to see the need to change. And sometimes that might be it's clear there's a market opportunity to be exploited. Sometimes it's, if we don't change, we're going to be in trouble. Sometimes we're in trouble. So there needs to be something, whether it's in life or in business, often there's some external motivation that's causing us to look afresh. It might simply be a new VP of marketing or a new VP of sales that just brings a fresh approach. But usually there's got to be something. I was talking to an organization the other day and said we've been in a largely monopoly industry. We've just been taking orders for 40 years, but suddenly that industry has been deregulated, and everybody is saying, "Whoa, we could be out of business in a couple of years if we don't change." So in that organization, there is a compelling desire to change. And yes, I do think there's got to be. I think you used the word vision, Jeff, and I think that's a very good word to describe it. You've got to paint that vision. Sometimes that comes from just looking at the customer journey and saying, how could we do this better? We have to do it better. And I think that's the catalyst that brings sales and marketing together.
Great. Well, before we close out our time together, I want to ask you one key takeaway that you would give for our listeners. What is that one thing or theme that you feel executives should always keep top of mind as they're going along this journey of alignment for the organization?
If you only do one thing, go and speak to the customers and the prospects who buy and don't buy your goods or services. Find out from the horse's mouth what truly needs to change. And as you go on that journey of change, continue to validate that change and check it's making a difference to the people that matter.
Perfect. Gary, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Jeff, my pleasure. I'm delighted that you're creating this podcast. It's long overdue.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to visit me at jeffdavis2.com and follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Davis2. Did today's conversation resonate with you? Then share with your colleagues to help the Alignment Podcast grow. Join us for the next episode where we continue to talk about how to create togetherness.